Good morning. My name's Lou. This is my business partner, Joe. And the subject of our seminar is how brainy is your organization. So there's loads of neuroscience stuff around at the minute, kind of everywhere here, and a lot of seminars on it. We've called it How Brainy is Your Organization and haven't put neuroscience in the title because we're going to kind of hopefully bring into a layman's, which is our favorite thing. Let's take something and see if we can make it practical and usable. So that's our intention today. So we might not be experts in neuroscience, but we do regard ourselves as experts in these areas. So role modeling, connection, engagement, rapport reinforcement, and I guess specifically our speciality is mindset and awareness, self-awareness. And we're going to be looking at the context of neuroscience in these areas. So last year, we did something around attention density, which is in the neuroscience field, which Joe is going to touch on again in a minute. And since then, we've done a lot of research, spent some time with some neurobiologists, sort of just hung out with them. And what we really found fascinating was the piece around emotions and how emotions work in the brain and impact our ability to learn or not. And as emotional connection is very important to us at Bolt, that's what we've kind of focused on. So that's what we're going to be covering today in the next half an hour, looking at how emotions in the brain impact our ability to learn or not. So can an old dog learn new tricks? Now the reason we put this up is because we are aware, and in our lifetime, in our business, we have, especially in corporate world in the olden days, we probably did label some people as untrainable, resistant, difficult. Am I the only one? Oh, no, thank goodness for that. And actually, what we want to do today is challenge that. Because up until the 1980s, the scientists researched and believed that the brain, once it had developed in childhood, had really little capacity to change much after that. However, since then, research has shown that the brain has enormous capacity to change, right up until the day we die, if we choose to use it. You know, the whole use it or lose it? I know when I came back from mat leave, I don't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, I'm not sure I knew exactly what I was doing before I went off, but when I came back, because I hadn't been using it, so it's that kind of thing. And actually, this morning, we really wanted to bring him with us. We were having breakfast. Did anyone else have breakfast just across that road, that little shop?
El Mundo Cafe or something?
Yeah. There's a guy in there, we saw him yesterday, and we were chatting to an elderly man, and he looked about 70, 93, and he's working 7 hours every day. On his third marriage...
Unless he falls asleep partway through the day,
yeah,
he said.
That's what he said, yeah. On his third marriage, used to teach ballroom dancing, be in the Navy. I mean, a very articulate, interesting man. And it was just very funny because he said to us, you've always got to keep using your brain, as long as you keep using your brain. We're like, my God, you need to come and do part of the seminar with us. So I guess the reason we're putting that up there is, if people have an emotional connection to the learning, then their desire to learn will be there, and you absolutely can, if you want to, change neural pathways in your brain and learn something new. So, over to Joe.
I do think the reason Reg was probably keeping his brain active, though, was because his wife was actually 35 years. 35 years his junior. Amazing. So, what we talked about last year was attention density. So, did anybody come to our seminar last year? Anybody? Okay, so I won't be boring you at least. So this is, we discovered this last year, and it made a lot of sense to us in terms of why learning does or doesn't work. And what it looks at is, if you want someone to take on something new, you need to expose them to it first of all. So bring in a new topic or a new skill or a new behaviour. Then you need to create ways of repeating it or helping them repeat it. Okay? Once they've repeated it, then it goes into short-term memory. And what then happens, if you can then apply it, that can help it go into your long-term memory in a much more sustainable way. So, if you take an example at school, it's used in education all the time. So I've got 3 children. My youngest is in reception class right now. She's learning to read, and my middle one is learning her times tables. And they're both 2 great examples of where they take this approach in education. So what they do is they expose them to new letters, new phonic sounds, and they get them to repeat them every day for 20 minutes. And they repeat and repeat and repeat. And then eventually, that starts to go in. So when you're looking at skills and knowledge, repetition alone can actually take that into your longer term memory so that you remember it and you recall on it at any time. But actually what they also do is they then give them situations where they can apply that. So they've learned the sound of ah, and then eventually they repeat it and they recognise an ah looks like this and it sounds like this and it occurs in words like this. And then they apply it in reading. So eventually you learn to read. Okay? Takes times tables. We all remember, I'm sure, learning them by rote at school. So the repetition, I'm sure you can all recall your 2 times table now. So the repetition alone will have taken that into your long-term memory. So with skills and knowledge, it can do. But then they'll give you some mathematical problems where you need to apply doubling numbers or halving numbers. So then that helps you take it into your long-term memory much quicker. And if you think about education, from nursery right to university, we're generally taking on skills and knowledge. That tends to be the learning that we're receiving. When you think about organisations, I'm sure that the work that you're involved in, and certainly the work that we're involved in, is much more around a way of being different. So whether that might be in your management style, it might be the culture, there's a whole spectrum of things, aren't there, where it's all about being different. Would you agree with that? Okay. So whilst you're probably involved in skills and knowledge, you can kind of take reassurance that repetition alone will help people take that on board. When you think about ways of being different and taking cultural shifts, for example, which feel much bigger, then the application is really important. We need to help people find a way of applying it. Now, of course, there are ways that you can, if you take feedback as an example, so anybody run workshops or been to workshops where it's about giving and receiving feedback? It seems to be quite a common example in management development, for example. And what we do is we expose them to a new model for giving feedback, and there's lots of them around. And then what we do is we help them repeat that. So we'll get them to discuss it, and we'll give them something on a flip chart or on PowerPoint, and then we might get them into role play so that they apply it in the classroom. Of course, what happens is they then go back to their desk or back to their team or back to wherever it is, and they put the manual on the shelf and they carry on doing what they were doing before. So there's something else that we want you to consider when you're thinking about taking the attention density approach. That's great, and if you're doing that already, fantastic. But in terms of the application, you need to have an emotional connection. Okay? So people talk about winning hearts and minds. If you want people to change, you've got to win their hearts and minds. You can't just give them information. So if you want me to remember things into my long-term memory, it must be important to me. Now, for some people, if they go to a workshop that's about feedback, they might have a real desire to want to take that on anyway. So they've already got that emotional connection with the topic. And you've all probably experienced learners or been a learner in a particular workshop where you go, I'm really up for this. And so whatever I learned today, I know that I'm going to go away and take something and apply this to my job. And it's probably been very successful. However, we've all experienced, or maybe been a delegate, that's slightly more resistant and actually doesn't want to be there, but they've been told they need to be there. It's mandatory. And as a facilitator or a coach or an HRD or whatever it is that you do, engaging those people can be quite a challenge sometimes, can't it? So we need to find a way of helping them make an emotional connection to what it is that we're asking them to do. And depending on what your role is here today, so I'm sure we've got some coaches in the audience and we've got some facilitators and some trainers, maybe some HRDs, maybe some CEOs, I don't know. But you all have a role to play in helping foster an environment where you can help people, your learners, make an emotional connection to what it is that you want them to do. And it's finding that way to do it. So that might be through your comms plan, it might be through a conference address that you do, and if you are the coach, it might be the way that you build rapport with the people that you've got in the room. But you have to find a way to help them make that emotional connection. So if you take the feedback example, so we've taken the attention density approach, and now what we've done is we've really raised their desire in the room to want to give feedback. Or we've built the rapport with them that's so strong that they think, I've seen, so when we run workshops and we give feedback to each other live in the room, they really connect with the way that we do that, so that actually gives them the desire to want to go and apply that when they go back to the workplace. So we've now repeated it, we've helped them apply it, we've raised the desire, they've made an emotional connection, and off they go, back to their desk with their team. Slide. However, that's conscious learning, and there is some research that suggests that only 10 to 20% of formal conscious learning actually transfers into the workplace. And that might be for a number of reasons. One of them might be that they're not making that emotional connection. So they've remembered some of the stuff and they're kind of applying some of it, but they're not really embracing it. And of course, if we are working with a cultural change programme, we're trying to get a shift, that can be a real challenge. And actually, it's quite disheartening if you think about the time, the money, and the energy that you invest into putting together programmes and running workshops and communications and conferences, to think that only 10 to 20% might transfer. Now, of course, there are variables here. Lou and I are lifelong learners, we're learnetics, and we take learning from anything because we just love it. And if we were one of your delegates, then we'd take a lot more than that, I can guarantee it. But we're not the majority of people. We're not the majority of people. The majority of people don't come to work to learn. They come to work to do a good job. They have roles and responsibilities that they need to tick off their list that day. They don't think, oh, what am I going to learn today and what do I want to go and apply? They don't think like that. So the thing to consider is the informal learning. So they've made the emotional connection now and they've got that desire and they start going and giving feedback. So let's work with the feedback example. They start going to give feedback and what happens is the people around them don't respond that well to receiving the feedback because they've not been on that programme. So they don't know that they're giving it with positive intent, so they just react to it. And then what happens is, I then start learning from their responses in an informal way. There's no design or strategy around it, but I'm surrounded by people that might not take feedback on really well. And then my manager gives me feedback in a really unhelpful way, and it's not useful, and it's very judgmental, and all of these things. So then I'm taking that learning on without even realising it. Or there's just an absence of feedback. So I'm giving all this feedback and no one else is, so then I'm learning, well, maybe it's not that important, but I don't realise that I'm learning that. So I guess our questions to you are, how much of the attention density approach do you take into consideration when you're designing any learning intervention? How much do you think about the emotional connection that your learners are making to the content, to the person that's delivering the training, or the outcome? And how much are you considering the informal learning? Because if you can think about this and how you engage the wider organisation, what you can do is enhance the conscious learning and not dilute it.
And we work with an organisation that has a women's group, and it's a very male-dominated organisation, and they have a women's group because they want to be more powerful in that sector. Now, they brought us in to do some work with the women, so, which we were, very enthusiastic about doing. However, what we challenged them around was, unless you also do some work with the men, there's no point doing this work with the women. So the women might leave, going, I'm going to go out there and be different, and the men are not used to it, will respond in a way that's not helpful, so I'm unlikely to apply it. So I think what we sometimes do is just look at this without considering what else is going on in the wider organisation that might impact this actually taking place.
But if you use a feedback model, and so I've been on this programme and it takes attention density into account, I've got an emotional connection because the way the comms plan's been done by the trainer that's using it, and I go back out to the workplace with a real desire, and then my line manager is also giving feedback in exactly the same way, guess what? It's going to reinforce my learning. So you go back to attention intensity, and then what you're doing is you're learning, you're building on the formal learning by really considering the informal learning too. Okay?
So we've heard about the power and importance of emotional connection for a positive learning experience. However, we also can be impacted in a very negative way by our emotions. As a very highly emotional being, I'm kind of expert in this area, which is why I'm covering it. So, feeling counts every bit as much and often more than thought. So I'm going to talk you through, in layman's, a bit about the brain and how it functions around emotions. So, we have three brains. We have the reptilian brain. Been around a very long time, 500 million years, and this is the brain that is focused on keeping us alive. And this is the part of the brain that spends its time scanning the environment for danger, just as it did when we lived back in the cave. Always looking for danger, which is why we often talk about worst case scenario rather than best case. Would you agree with that? You rarely hear people going, well, the best case scenario is this. We go into worst case, catastrophic fantasy, which we are very expert in doing most of the time. So that's the reptilian brain. The next bit is the limbic system, which is completely concerned with regulating our emotions. And this is the part of the brain that is often referred to as the emotional brain. So it's a bit younger, 50 million years, but this is the part that does all of the emotional stuff. Yeah. And then we have the neocortex, which is our intellectual brain, which is only 2.5 million years old as the brain is evolved. And unfortunately for the neocortex, the intellectual brain, it is completely dominated by both of the other brains, the emotional brain and the reptilian brain, because fear and safety will always override rational thought. So when we go into catastrophic fantasy, and I used to be a complete hypochondriac, I'm getting better, I would get a pain in my head. I'll probably start getting one in a minute, just so you know, because I get a pain in my head, and I go, oh, I've got a bit of head pain. I get another one, and I'm clearly going to have a brain hemorrhage. And I know you're laughing, it's not funny, by the way. And I would, rational thought, completely out the window. Completely out the window, because my reptilian brain has gone, oh my God, danger. My emotions have taken over, and I can't think straight. You might get an email from your line manager that you interpret in a way that's not helpful, and you start panicking, that you're in a bit of trouble, and you can't then focus on the report you were writing. You know, that kind of, this is what happens, completely overridden. And I'm going to tell you a bit about why that happens. So, within the emotional brain, two parts of the brain that are really significant, well, one part that's really significant with memory and learning, which is the hippocampus. So this is the bit that Joe was talking about earlier around attention density. So this is the part of the brain that takes short-term into long-term memory. Yeah. And this is the part of the brain that is about facts and information and dates. So think about when I have my children, it's the hippocampus that will remind me of exactly what happened, what time he was born, how much he weighed, what the date was. Yeah. The amygdala is a part of the brain that sits in the emotional brain, however, it is connected to the reptilian brain. So this is the bit that's concerned with survival and emotional needs, and this is the bit that brings the subjective feelings to a memory that the hippocampus has given us. So when I think about having my son, I've got all the facts and information, this is the bit that brings all the emotion I felt. Yeah, so they work together. However, unfortunately, for the hippocampus, when we are under stress, the hippocampus ability to do what it's supposed to do decreases, and the amygdala increases. So what we have is an amygdala hijack. And I know when I'm having one, because I get really heavy arms. My arms become like lead and pins and needles, and I think, oh, I'm being hijacked. I mean, I don't actually think that, but that's what's happening. And I panic and I worry.
I do sometimes. I'm being
hijacked. So over here, we use our version of the learning curve. I don't know if can you see it over there? So down here, we have comfort zone. Don't learn very much there. Up here, we have constructive tension. We can send you this, by the way, if you want it afterwards. And constructive tension is what we call the optimum state for learning. This is where I know when I'm in constructive tension, because I have a sense of, oh, I'm a bit nervous, or I'm not sure I want to do this, but I know if I don't do it, I'll be really irritated with myself that I haven't done it. So I know it's a learning opportunity. And this is where the intellectual brain can take the stress. So it is still functioning here. So it's going, it feels a bit of a stretch, but I'm still working. However, down here is anxiety. When we start to tip, and some people it just takes a little tip, the amygdala kicks in and can completely override rational thought. And that's when we go into fight, flight, freeze. And there are some people we know, just walking into a training room can do that to them. Especially if, you walk into a training room with people like us, no tables or chairs, no PowerPoint, no manual, a lot of coloured things around like that. Oh my God, what is going on? And they go into freeze. And what often happens is we go, God, they're resistant, they're awkward, they're an awkward delegate. Well, actually, potentially, because I'm sure there are awkward delegates out there, potentially they've just tipped over into anxiety and this has happened. Make sense? So what does that mean for us? How can we help people with this? Who's got a view, actually, around how we might be able to really simply start helping people with this? So I was speaking to someone over there earlier, actually, who was talking about a big change program they're running with a group of people that have been in their role, doing it the way they've been doing it for years. They've been told things are changing, and they've become very resistant. So probably this is what's happening. So what's one thing you can do, which we always do with any change program? Really simple. I'm going to come to you at the back in a minute because you promised you to... Any ideas? No? I was like, not making eye contact with me. We could just talk to them about it.
They could be in an amygdala hijack now.
Yeah, I've put them into hijack. They're all hijacked. We could just talk to them about it. So we could just draw this and explain this and say, this is what happens when there's a change, actually, we get into a place of uncertainty and lack of control, and it tips us. And just by sharing how we're feeling will often shift us out a little bit, just by sharing it. So what we always do in any change program we run is talk to people about, so how do you feel about this then? Rather than going straight into, this is how it's going to be. So simple and often overlooked. The other thing that we do is we help people raise their self-awareness so that they are able to recognize when this kind of thing is happening to them, as I can. So I talk about my heavy arms. I have a lot of self-awareness around my fears. And what we do is work with people to help them do this. So this is an EQ model, emotional intelligence model. Some of you may have seen this before. Quickly I'll run through how the model works. So the real bit we've added, but when we have self-awareness, we are much more aware of other people. So when we know we've got our own stuff that goes on, we go, oh, I wonder what's behind that behavior, rather than labeling them as resistant, yeah? Because we're aware. When we're more aware of others, our relationship with that person is going to be much stronger and kind of rapport is going to be easier to build because we are second positioning them and considering what might be going on for them. If we have self-awareness, we're much more able to self-manage. So for example, I know when I get my heavy arms, I'm going to hang on a minute, I know what's going on, I can breathe through it and manage it. So when I can manage myself, I'm aware of other people, the way that I interact with people in terms of influencing, engaging, whatever it might be, will be much more effective. So we have 5 levels to our awareness. Okay. So number 1 is none. Anyone work with someone with no self-awareness? Yes, we all have. Oh, a big nod, yes. Anyone live with someone with no self-awareness? It's tough. Why is it tough? Why is it tough? When you have no self-awareness, what don't you do? You don't reckon it's everyone else's fault, right? It's not me, it's you. The fact we have a really crap relationship is because of you. It's nothing to do with me. Yeah. So that's step 1. And some people exist in that world and they're very happy there. Let's just not spend any time with them, would be my suggestion. Number 2, I become aware of my behavior. So I know I have a pace. I speak quickly, I think quickly, I process things quickly. So for years I was not aware of that. I thought everyone else was just very slow. It was everyone else, nothing to do with me. Then I became aware of the fact I had a pace because people kept telling me to slow down. But it was aware of my behavior, full stop. That's it. Number 3 is, okay, so I'm aware of my behavior and now I'm aware of the impact. So people would say to me, and they still do at times, you're doing that, are you not getting it, face? Because I've got it and I'm there and I'm looking at people like, so I know the impact that can have. And there are a lot of people out there who are at level 3, but are completely in a place of, that's just who I am. It's just what I do. Like it or lump it. Been with them, around them. I mean, that's just as tough as no self-awareness.
And then they claim they're being authentic.
Yeah. No flexibility whatsoever, which we know, especially in the workplace, is really unhelpful. So the next level is where it kind of, where it becomes great, I suppose, where I now care about the impact. And if I care about the impact I'm having, I'm going to be much more flexible. So I try and slow down. I try and stop my don't you get it yet face, all that kind of stuff, because I don't want to impact in a way that's not helpful to people. The bit that we really want to tap into and that we really challenge our clients where we want them to go is to the desire to explore why they behave like that. If you just stay at number 4, by the way, that's great. Number 4 is a great place to be. But number 5, what you do is you get to understand why you behave like that. And I know, after a lot of work and a lot of ugly crying, let me tell you, why I have this pace on me. It's one of the reasons, not the only reason. It's because deep down, I have a view and a fear that if I show any vulnerability, you won't love me anymore. It's a big thing for me, this. So what I do is, when I feel a little bit uncomfortable, I just speed up and get through it. Or I'd have to sit, I'm a bit uncomfortable, I'm just going to whiz through that. And just by knowing that, actually, has been quite curative. So now what I do is go, I know that's going on for me. When I get my heavy arms, rather than just trying to work, I sit with it and kind of, okay, I'm just noticing it. And I'm sharing more vulnerability. And actually, you're part of my therapy today, because just sharing that with you is very helpful for me, so thank you for that. So this is number 5. Does that make sense? You've got to have a very strong desire, though, to want to do this. Now, the challenge with this stuff, so if I'm vulnerable, you won't love me anymore, comes from, unfortunately, my parents. They're not here, so they won't be offended. We are brought up between the ages of 0 and 7 People familiar with transaction analysis? Anyone? TA? Life scripts, by the age of 7 they're written. The brain stuff backs this up actually, because between 0 and 7, pretty much, the reptilian survival part of our brain is what dominates how we operate. So kids are complete emotional beings, aren't they? So I say to my daughter, I'm talking to someone, I'm on the phone. She just keeps going. Completely hedonistic. I need it. That's what children do. And as we grow up, other parts of the brain kick in and we become a bit more balanced. But because of that, because of our inability to process information in an adult way, and we're very emotional, anything anybody tells us when we're little, we take it on as truth and fact. Now, no one in my family has ever said to me, Lou, if you show weakness, I'm not going to love you. But I've grown up with a mother who does that. So I've learned, to go to Joe's point, unconscious modelling, unconscious learning, that is how I've learned my limiting beliefs. So why is this important? It's all very interesting. When we talk about mindset, and we're doing a change program, and what we want to do is have a much more open and honest culture. And I've been brought up, and I'm unaware of this, by the way, because this would be unconscious. I've been brought up being told, speak when you're spoken to, be seen and not heard. Anyone have that as a kid? And I get into an organisation that says, you need to start giving everyone feedback, including your senior team and your boss. How might that manifest? If I've got that laid down in my belief system, which is a template for the way that I operate now, how is that going to impact my ability to give feedback to someone senior? I'm not going to be up for it, am I? And what we do is go, you just need to change your mindset. What's your problem? Just change your mindset. Well, what we're saying is, could you please just rewind? Let's give you some regression therapy, go back to 7, and just change all those beliefs that you had there, they're limiting you, and then change your mindset. And what we want you to do is do that in a one-day workshop. Or actually, I'm just going to communicate the change, and could you just shift it by the end of the communication?
Well, the other thing people do is send you on the same workshop twice. They've clearly not got it, we'll send them again.
Yeah.
And the third time, and call it advanced.
Yeah. Now, of course, this is not about slagging people off and organisations off, because we've all done it. I guess the point we're trying to make here is, this stuff is really complex. And anyone who was here last year would have seen what we added to the attention density equation was self-awareness. Because for us, before you can truly be exposed to new ways of thinking, you need to be aware of how you think now. So the fact that I'm now aware that I believe vulnerability means people won't love me anymore, means I'm much more open to taking on other stuff. Before that, being empathic was a stretch for me. She still is, but I think I've got better. Because it just felt uncomfortable and I wasn't sure why. So you could expose me to empathy and empathic listening, but I wasn't going to take it on because I had this big kind of weight around my ankles saying, you can't do that, because they won't like you, won't love you. So until you're self-aware of how you currently think, your mindset is going to be a stretch to change. But it doesn't mean you can't, because it is always plastic until the day you die. So, to shift mindset, we must raise self-awareness. And I guess that is what we specialise in. We do a lot of work to help people get in the right space to go and learn something new. I guess is how we would frame it. Are we all right for time, by the way? So we're on a summary slide. We like to talk.
So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour, really, in terms of, we specialise in mindset and self-awareness. There's a real connection for us in between the emotions that are often kind of put to one side in the workplace and actually the success of any learning interventions that we are designing or involved with or communicating. So to summarise it, really, the brain remains plastic until we die, use it or lose it. So what you've got to do is help people create and strengthen those neural pathways so they get lots of practice and repetition. In order to do that, what you need to do is really think about the attention density approach and think about how you're going to help them apply it. Because if it's not just skills and knowledge and it's a way of being, the application is going to be a critical component of that equation. In order to do that, you need to help them make an emotional connection. So you need to hook into what matters for them. And there are lots of different ways and lots of different roles within organisations that can get involved with fostering an environment that can do that. So it's really worth considering how you do it currently and how else you could do it. Once you've done that, remember that learning is happening all of the time. So if you want people to really take this on and really enhance these fantastic learning interventions that you're involved with, you've got to really consider the informal learning too, if you want to really enhance it and get the most bang for your buck. And then finally, fear and safety always override rational thoughts. So think about what might be going for people emotionally, and self-awareness is the real key to help people shift their mindset. So this is a quote to leave you with. So the cognition of the brain must be added to the experience of the soul. Make what you want from that. I had to read it about 3 times, but I do really like it. And I guess that's just saying hearts and minds matter. We can't just throw information at people and expect them to do something different. So we talked about feedback today in terms of our example. We would really love some feedback from you. We're on stand 211 over there. We'd love to hear what you think. Positive or negative, we don't like the word negative, but developmental. We really love to know what you thought about what we had to say today. And if you don't have time to come over and see us and you're on Twitter, we'd love you to engage with us on Twitter too. So we're at Bolt from the U. We'd love to talk to you and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.